Hello again, it's Sarah from This Curly Girl Sews. Welcome to my sewing room. Today I have another free tutorial. I'm sorry it's been quite a long time since the last one, but I've been busy doing some artwork, hence my new t-shirt. Do you like it? Sociopath. I've uploaded this together with a couple of other new designs, and I've got loads of artwork that I've done for Christmas as well. So I'll put a link down below if you want to go and take a look, or want to buy a shirt or a tote bag or something with my artwork on. But in the meantime, the next free pattern is going to be these storage bins. They're stacking. They've got round bottoms in 3 sizes. They're also reversible, so you can turn them inside out. So let me just demonstrate with this small one. So the inside is obviously a different fabric on mine. So you can turn it in the other way and then put the other fabric as the fold over. There we go. So you have the fancy fabric on the top. They're great for storing all sorts of things. Larger ones maybe for towels or toilet rolls, or put a plant in them. You can have them as a set, or you can just make one of them. I also have written instructions which are fully illustrated with a step-by-step guide on how to make one of the pods. Obviously they're all made in exactly the same way. If you're a beginner, I would start with either the large one or the medium one to start with. The small one, because of its size, is quite tricky to sew. Obviously the curves are a lot tighter to sew and it's a lot more fiddly to sew. So these two are really good to start with as a beginner. So let's get started. So once you've cut out your pattern, you need to do a couple of little things before you actually start sewing. Obviously attach interfacing. Now I'll go in depth a little bit more about interfacing. This pod has interfacing on both the lining and the outer fabric. It's a reasonably substantial interfacing, about the weight of a quilting cotton or a poplin type cotton. So it gives a really strong structure to the fabric. This is made out of a lightweight canvasy cotton on the outside and an old curtain I had that I cut up on the inside. But that gives quite a sturdy pod. In contrast, this is one made with quilting cotton, which hasn't been interfaced, and a cotton drill on the inside. So this has not been interfaced at all, and this is quite soft. Although it does hold up well, it's not as sturdy as this. As you can see, if I place my hand, equal pressure on the top, this one stands up and this one doesn't, but this one doesn't have interfacing. To make this one more sturdy, this quilting cotton, I think it would be best to use an interfacing on it, but in contrast, I don't think the cotton drill would need interfacing. So if you're using a slightly thicker fabric, like a drill or a canvas, I would say maybe don't interface it. But if you're using lightweight linen or quilting cotton, poplin cotton, something like that, I would use interfacing, just so that you get a little bit more shape to your pod. Let's get started. So once you've applied the interfacing to all of the pieces, so you'll have 2 large sections, one lining, one actual piece for each of the circles. Obviously I've made this one already, so that's the pieces there. You will also have a lining piece and a fabric piece for each of the side rectangles. Once you attach the interfacing, on the rectangles you need to, on the top edge, just fold over 1 centimetre, like so, and press that down. Make sure it's on the top edge. So if your fabric, like this one, has a direction, obviously there's people on it and I don't want them upside down, make sure it's the top edge that you do that with. And you need to do that on all of the rectangle pieces. So you have here all of the rectangle pieces, the top edge is folded over 1 centimetre for the seam allowance, and do that before you start. Also, you need to mark the quarter marks on the circles. So you can either do that from the pattern pieces, all the quarter marks are marked on the pieces and just mark with a pencil or a pen just on the edge. Or you can, once you've cut them out, you can fold them in half, just snip and snip, fold them in half the other way to match up the two little snips that you've made, and snip and snip. So as long as you have the quarter pieces marked on all of the circles. Let me do this one now. So fold it in half, like so. Then at that edge, just do a tiny snip in the very edge outside of the seam allowance. Then flip it round to the other side. Exactly the same again, just snip off the edge or mark with a pen. Then those two notches or those two marks that you've just made, fold it in half again, match up those notches or marks, and then just cut on the other edges as well. So when you open it out, you have a notch on each quarter. Let's start sewing. First, what we're going to do is, with all of the rectangle pieces, we're going to fold them in half, right sides together, and then we're going to stitch along the short side. So if we clip or pin along all the short edges of all the rectangle pieces, and then using your 1 centimetre seam allowance, just stitch all the way along the edge. So we're going to take the rectangles and sew 1 centimetre from the edge. That's the outer fabric done, and now do exactly the same on the lining. So once you've stitched along all the short edges, what you need to do then is mark the quarters on the rectangles as well. So you've got that lovely stitched edge there, so just go to the other side, so literally fold it in half and snip the edge, and do that on the top and the bottom of the rectangle. So once you've done that, you need to fold it in half again, matching up the notch at the midpoint and the seam, like so, and then you're going to cut another notch in the other side. So the notch and the seam, if I turn it around it's probably easier to see, the notch and the seam are the midpoint now, so either end you're going to cut a tiny notch just to mark the quarter points again. And again, do that on the top as well. So cut that notch and then one on the other side. So now you have all your quarters marked on your rectangle as well. What you need to do now is, on the top where the folded edge is, where the seam is sewn, about 2 centimetres or 1 inch down from the top, you just need to just cut towards the seam allowance. So you just cut a notch that shape at the top. You can see the seam is about 3 millimetres or 1/4 inch away from the cut, just so that when you fold that over, that's not going to have so much bulk. Then you need to take your rectangles to the ironing board and press that seam open. So once you've ironed out those seams so they're all flat, it'll look something like that, which will have reduced the bulk in this area, so this is nice and slim. So next we need to mark the quarters on all of these. So if you take the seam there and hold it flat, what you're going to do is just snip the end, so you end up with a little notch like so. Then you need to put that notch onto the seam in the centre, and then again on the wide angles just cut little notches on the quarter marks. So then you have all 4 quarters marked. So do the same, just unfold where you've just pressed that over, and then do the same on the top as well. So just cut a tiny little notch. You can see how big the notches are there. And then line up those notch with the seam, pull that out, cut a little notch on that side, and then another one on that side. So once you've done that, you need to do the same with the base. Now you can either take the markings from the pattern piece, because all 4 the quarters are marked on there, or you can do it a very simple way. So you fold the piece in half, make sure it's folded in half, and then on the outer circumference just cut a tiny notch, and same on the other side, and then fold those 2 notches together like that, and then do exactly the same on the other quarters. So what you'll have then is the 4 quarters of the circle marked so that they match up with the ones on the base. Right, the next thing you're going to do is attach the bottom to the body. So with the folded edge at the bottom, place it on top of your table with your bottom base fabric facing down, pop it inside and line 1 notch up with the seam and pop a clip there just to hold it. Then turn the base around, and then on the other side where the notch is, match it with the notch on the body. So turn it around a quarter, and again match with the notch, and again on the other quarter. So initially you will have the 4 quarters pinned or clipped like I have there. Then you need to just ease the rest into the straight of the rectangle. So just do it a quarter at a time and just do it very gently. What you've got to remember is it doesn't matter if it's slightly puckered, because the stitch line is actually going to be 1 centimetre in from the edge of the circle anyway. So at that point it should be exactly the same size as the hole in the bottom of the rectangle. So once you've gone all the way around, it should look something like that, with all the clips just holding the base in place. Next, you're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew with the circle up and the rectangle down. So you're going to sew around 1 centimetre from the edge all the way around. So now we're going to sew the base on. So you have the base up and the rectangle underneath, and then slide into the machine, and you need to make sure that underneath is always flat, and then you're basically sewing slowly and carefully, keeping a 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around. So once you've sewn both the bottoms on the outer and the lining, what you need to do now is on the rectangles, the bottom of the rectangles, just all the way around the bottom, just every inch or 2 centimetres, just put a little nick, not as far as the stitch line, just maybe about 3/4 of the way up through, just so that when you sew these together, the fabric will have a little bit of room to breathe and it will lay flatter. So literally just go all the way around on both the lining and on the outer fabric. So there's the lining done. Do the same on the outer fabric. So once you've just clipped around all of that, if you sit it down on the ground, you'll see that the fabric now has time to breathe, and those little notches will actually open up very slightly. So what you need to do now is take your outer fabric, so that's the pattern, the nice one that you want on the outside, and with the seam away from you, so you turn the lining in so that it's facing out like that, and the interfacing is on the inside, and this is your lining fabric. What you're going to do is you're going to take your outer fabric, so get the seam away from you again on the lining, pop the outer fabric inside, and then matching up the two seams, you're going to clip that together. So then matching the notches on both pieces, clip those together as well. And finally the notches on the inside. So you will end up with all 4 of your notches pinned or clipped. So there we go, there's all 4 of my notches pinned in place. So just ease it out so that it's flat, and then you can actually just clip the rest in place, because you're going to now sew this together. This is the final bit of sewing on here, and the reason that the outer fabric is on the inside is because it's easier to sew it from the inside. I'll show you. Finish putting the clips all the way around the edge. You need to make sure all the edges are lined up perfectly as well, because you're going to actually edge stitch all the way around. So you're going to edge stitch from the inside, which is why you have the outer fabric on the inside, because you're actually top stitching it as well then. So now we just need to edge stitch all the way around there. So now we're going to sew around the top. So if we start at where the seam is there, so that any back stitching or anything is there, and then slowly stitch around using an edge stitch, which is going to be about 2 millimeters from the edge. Just make sure that those edges are really lined up well. now you've edge stitched all the way around the top there. That's completely finished. So all you need to do now is turn your pod in the right way. And you might need to just have a little bit of a fiddle with the seams just to get them lying flat in the bottom of the lining. Okay, and then you can fold over the top. Of course, you don't have to fold over the top. It's just quite a cute little design detail to have, obviously, the different fabric highlighted there. So there you have your completed pod. I hope you've enjoyed sewing your pods. Whether you make a set or you make two the same size in different fabrics or matching, it's entirely up to you. They're really handy for putting all sorts of things in. With Christmas coming up as well, what might be a really fab idea is to make them out of Christmas fabric. You could have one fabric on the outside and a different Christmas fabric on the inside, and then have mix and match all around your house with sweets in, with presents in, with all sorts of Christmas goodies in. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on Instagram, This Curly Girl Sews. The links will be at the end for you to see. Happy sewing, everyone!